Let's talk about the new MatPat video. And before anyone gets ruffled, I don't mean that in a way to target MatPat. In fact, a lot of elements in this video I've wanted to do for a while now, and trust me, if you think there's going to be some sort of battle here, it's not really happening. Recently, MatPat made a sort of different FNAF theory, fed up with a lot of the FNAF theory hate, not just towards game theory itself, but a lot of the other FNAF theory channels, some of which I consider my own friends, and there was a lot of mixed feedback on it. Now, does that mean I'm on the side of YouTube theorists like is proposed as one of the waging sides early on in that video? No, it doesn't. While there shouldn't even really be this imagined war of channels versus the community as an overgeneralization, which we'll get to later, I've had my fair share of dealings on both sides. I am a FNAF Theorists channel, that much is obvious, and I certainly agree with a few of MatPat's points in the video, but I also disagree with just as many, and I've felt some of the same concerns that might be being lobbied at FNAF Theory channels in the past few years. This isn't some sort of arms race between sides, so that's just not how this video is going to go. After asking a lot of people what their takes on all this are and coming to terms with what I think's happened, I felt it best to outline 3 rules, both golden rule tips that every good FNAF theorist should always take into consideration, and ones that may have a much broader meaning when applied to the whole discussion. In this video, I'm going to use specific examples MatPat outlines in his video, as well as a few I've come up with on my own as good reference points for where the community, and he himself, as much as many may not like it, break the rules. Without any further ado, rule 1, just get your facts right. One big point I took away from MatPat's video, above all else, was that information is key. At this point, FNAF is 9 years old, and it's important to use and spread its oodles of information since that's what theories grow on. The point he makes is that even if a theory ends up getting something wrong, what's more important is sharing ideas and information so that we can do better in the future. I love this point, I adore it, I embrace it, and I've spent hours poring over every corner of the series to make sure I don't get a single thing wrong, but that's sort of been in vain. As much as I love hearing someone emphasize the importance of information, my biggest problem with the recent game theories hasn't been jumping the shark or perhaps interpreting things differently, but getting basic facts wrong. And let me emphasize again, I don't mean MatPat claiming something under an interpretation when there's another one on the table. I mean misrepresentation of crucial information. Some of these might be like saying Gregory's shirt is purple, or saying Elizabeth has a connection to the color blue, or saying the mimic is specifically connected to the mushroom costume. And my personal least favorite, saying Chica was Edwin's first animatronic. These book ones are especially critical, as anyone who can't or doesn't read the books just wouldn't know better than MatPat saying Edwin's first animatronic was Chica when she was really his 18th. In fact, one of the last ones he ever made. Just so we're not picking on MatPat here, another example that comes to mind is John's circus baby theory, which used the fact that the mimic wears a jester costume to connect the two characters. Well, it turns out that wasn't so much a fact when considering that the jester suit in question is yellow, lime, and pink, a far cry from Circus Baby's pastel reds and whites. No, I don't think John meant to misrepresent the jester costume, or Matt meant to get facts wrong from the mimic story. No, they're not intentionally trying to mislead their audiences to push a narrative, but with all that, I can see why people might think that. A simple bit of misinformation can be excused, but when it becomes one of the key building blocks for a theory, like Circus Baby and the Mimic or Edwin and Henry, you start to lose the trust of people that you'll provide the accurate information you deem so important. While I don't know if this is what most people might be mad at the new game theories for, that wasn't a criticism with the old ones, at least take away that as big FNAF theorists, we have a responsibility to, at the bare minimum, provide accurate information that doesn't disrupt arguments further. On to rule 2, context clues are important. Like I said in the last section, FNAF is nearly 9 years old, and that doesn't just mean knowing the facts, but knowing where they've been and how they've evolved over time. As much as it may shock some people, Scott did not have the story planned out from day one, and there's telltale signs that the story has had some clear revisions over time. In his video, Matt likens FNAF's story to be built on shifting sand, and while over the years a lot has changed and shifted, it's not impossible to find stable ground by trying to outline not just what has changed, but the contexts and explanations for why it did, and what it used to be, especially with how Scott tries to clear things up in his next installments. While I don't necessarily agree that Dream Theory was ever the intended interpretation, it's a fact that there was indeed an intended interpretation back then that sister location certainly changed. And even now, there's a few points outlined in Matt's video that are heavily affected by outside context. One example is with Gregory taking a bite out of some suspiciously bare bear-shaped ice cream in one of the endings. While that might look like some great evidence to connect him to the crying child, blink again and you'll notice that key detail's gone. While there are some new details in this shot that Security Breach didn't initially have, there was no need to remove that Freddy-shaped ice cream unless it was to lead us back in the right direction like Scott always does, this time with way more direct involvement than he ever had with Security Breach. And then we come to the biggest topic of all: what is the canon of Tales? With what is honestly some good due diligence, Matt makes sure to note that while Tales was originally marketed as in the world of the upcoming games, that line was later removed and replaced by Tales taking place across uncharted corners of the series canon. Unfortunately, knowing that just wasn't enough, as someone emailed Scholastic directly who confirmed that the change was purely of marketing strategy and not indicative of the series content. Thus, the line still stands today. While this one's definitely the smallest of the points, similar to the last one, theorists should make sure they know not just the contents of the series, but how those have changed over time, as well as the complete outside context that help shape our understanding of its many elements. And finally is rule 3, don't generalize. This is sort of the point I was hinting at the start, but generalizing in both information and theorizing itself is just not how this series was ever meant to work. Not everything in the series is black and white, and generalizing might end up hurting more than helping. Another phrasing of this is actually use your better judgment, which is surprisingly not something every theorist tends to do. In the case of FNAF theories, this one has a lot to do with the information that's valid for us to use, and especially how we use it. Let's take a look at something like the character encyclopedia, which you'd think would be a pretty reliable source of information, but a lot of people have pointed out quite a few errors, like it messing up Bonbon's gender or saying Nightmarians in FNAF AR. Same goes for the Freddy Files, with it accidentally calling this Circus Baby's Pizza World, or getting the number of graves wrong here. At that point, you could write either of these two books off completely, but if you did that, you'd be doing a huge disservice to parts of each book that contain massive lore hints not found anywhere else in the series. The point of this section was using your better judgment, and if you look at these two books, you'll notice information that could not possibly have been inserted into the book by anyone other than Scott himself. Take the Freddy Files Fazbear Fright sections, where Prankster's page is written with specific meta hints that couldn't possibly be from anyone other than Scott. Same goes for the encyclopedia, where it labels both Burntrap and the Blob as not being their canon names, which is a canon-bearing statement that can genuinely only be said by the man himself. Point is, it's not good to just classify a book like this as either trustworthy or not, since there are always going to be telltale signs you can look at to tell what's important and what might be a mistake. It's not cherry-picking to be able to say these two books are important while this one isn't, when you can clearly identify what Scott had a hand in making. And it's certainly not cherry-picking to be able to identify the elements of each tale story that suggests their canonicity. Nobody, not a single theorist, on YouTube or not, should be saying that 100% of this book series or that book series is canon, because if you just open the box and look inside, you discover that the answer's somewhere in the middle. Across Frights and Tales, there's stories that can be canon, absolutely cannot be canon, and some that just don't really matter. And that's not because I'm trying to cherry pick what's canon, it's because I've actually read the books. And for example, know that in Nexi, they were planning to remove the baobab tree, which is something MatPat just did not know. If you'd actually just read the books and see their contents, you'd know they're not just black and white for either side of the argument. All you have to do is open the box and know what's inside. And something like this goes for theorists themselves too. The video made a point of identifying two different thought processes, split by Myers-Briggs intuitive and sensing. And while a lot have been suggesting that this was only to show how both thought processes are valid and we should unite together, is that really what the video said? With all the data Matt shows, if it's to be believed that a lot of the hate is coming from S's who can't think outside the box in more abstract ways, then why is it that there appears to be so very few S's in the theory space, and that 75% or more of them have been here as long as we have, before all these theories started getting hate? Matt's pointing out such a minuscule amount of people that trying to identify everyone hating on modern theories as S-type mentalities just ended up unnecessarily labeling the opposition. I am intuitive, and have always been, no matter how many times I retake the Myers-Briggs test, but I still think that some of Tales is canon, and that Matt labeling that belief as an S-type way of seeing things is just going to cause more strife and confusion by dividing the fanbase even further. Aside from the Myers-Briggs personality test being proven as pseudoscience for not-so-savory reasons, which many pointed out after the video came out, using it in this context was just not a good way of labeling beliefs. And I've already seen it starting to unfold with theorists accusing others of having an S mindset in a bad way like the video implies. No theory discussion needs more of an S or an N mindset to be able to solve it better. It just needs one that's well informed. One that can get all the facts right, which is just something I have to say Matt has not done in this or many of his last few theories. So, what's the moral of the story here? Well, we all just need to try better. I love seeing a video in support of sharing information and being united as one to try and solve things, but nobody's gonna take it serious when the video itself is riddled with missing or incorrect information and labels certain mindsets as good and bad, problems that have riddled some of the most recent game theories. It's not the fanbase that's shifted, it's how much they could trust what you were saying, and right now, it sounds like it's at an all-time low.